Old coins and stamps, paintings and books, all were common products that are being collected today. And now you can add jar collecting to the list. But why would anyone want to collect old canning jars? Well, actually they're called fruit jars in the hobby because there is no jar that actually says canning jar on it, but there are jars that say fruit jars. So let's start collecting. It's easy and inexpensive to begin. When you start to look, you'll find jars everywhere. You're going to love jar collecting. Among the 10,000 jars priced in the Red Book Guide, there's enough variation in jars' colors and sizes, shapes and closures to keep the interest of anyone. Many people who collect jars combine their hobby with home decorating. And of course, as with all antiques, collectors know that finding just the right jar is a big part of the fun of collecting. And with jars right now, new finds are still happening from old basements, barns, and attics. To better understand jar collecting, we should talk about a few things that were happening around the 1890s. First, people discovered that food could be preserved by heating and then sealing that food from the air. The first canning was done in tin and stoneware containers, but that quickly moved to glass jars. Some of the most valuable jars today are those very early glass jars that were made in dark colors to keep out the damaging sunlight, or so they thought. These almost black jars weren't made very long. I imagine people didn't like that they couldn't see what was in the jar or if it was clean before they used it. They say that color is king in jar collecting, and a big part of what makes a jar collectible is its color. Amber jars make great collectibles, and jars can be found in shades of blue and yellow and green. Most old glass jars today are found in shades of aqua, or what advertisements used to call common green glass. Just prior to 1890, a huge gas field was discovered near southeastern Indiana, and more than 25 new glass houses opened in that area alone. Glass makers in Indiana and around the country branded their jars with a unique name, some trying to describe what a wonderful product they had, like the Best, or Lady's Choice, or Dandy. Some had the name of the original patent holder, like a Haynes or a Clark, or the name of the city where the factory was located, like Marion, or Swayze, or Red Key. Sometimes the name was that of the large glass company itself, like Ball, or Hero, or Consolidated Fruit Jar Company. These interesting names and fancy logos contributed to the wonderful variety in the jars we collect today. Jars from this period could be almost unique, with bubbles and imperfections and other things, like having a whittled appearance that was caused by steam escaping from a cold glass mold. The early jar molds were hand cut in dense wood or soft metal, and mistakes were made with incorrect dates, reversed letters and numbers, and all sorts of other non-standard variations. Glass was sometimes made in small batches, with sand and ingredients mixed right on the factory floor. Colors and shades of colors were not a concern, and there was little quality control. Some manufacturers worked on a piecework pay system. Jars from an individual or a manufacturing team were marked with a letter or number, and their daily pay was based on output. These added letters and numbers created collectible variation in jars. Many jars have patent dates because of the focus on patent protection at the time. You will be amazed at how many types of fruit jar closures were patented over the years. The familiar Mason patent jars refer to the screw-down metal lid that Mason patented in 1858, and it's still used today. These Mason patent jars were produced for over 50 years and spanned the time from when jars were hand-finished, which we call the ground lip jars, to the machine-made smooth lip jars. About this time, 5 brothers from the Ball family in Buffalo, New York, moved their glass business to Indiana, and over the years bought up many of these smaller glass houses. They modified the jar molds to gather them under the Ball brand of jars, and Ball State University today is one lasting legacy of the Ball family's influence on Muncie, Indiana. The first jar many people think about when they hear about jar collecting is the bluish green ball perfect mason jar, last made in that color in 1937. The Lake Michigan sand that Ball used contained iron that colored the glass. These jars are decorative, but not sought after by most collectors, because Ball literally sold tens of millions of these machine-made jars. By about 1901, the cheap natural gas was running out, and product quality helped dictate popularity and sales. The older glass-making plants with the old technology were closed. The golden age of jar manufacturing in terms of producing collectible jars was over. It's not hard to imagine that some people kept pretty jars around to decorate with, probably as early as the 1920s. And jar collecting as an organized hobby seems to have taken off in the late 1960s and early 70s, around the time leading up to the bicentennial of the US. I hope you enjoyed this video that showcases some of my jar collection. We'll see you next time.